Today, I'm joined by Christina Sensun Ramirez, who is a leading civil rights leader and former 2020 U.S. Senate candidate. She was named Hero of the New South by Southern Living magazine, and her work has been featured on NPR, Vogue, the New York Times, and MTV. Christina, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm not sick or unemployed like millions of people. So given the global circumstances, I'm doing okay, though I am in the state of Texas where we don't believe in science. And if you go outside, you can be really put at risk of getting COVID these days.
And speaking of that, because I mean, it is an absurd situation that we're in, particularly in the South and the Bible Belt, where governors are taking back the mask mandates and opening up their facilities to full capacity, which is completely anti-science at the time where we could be moving in a direction where we could be putting the pandemic behind us. Talk about what's going on in Texas with Governor Greg Abbott and your work to try to counteract the ignorance and the anti-science move by Governor Greg Abbott.
Yeah, I mean, what's important, whether you live in Texas or not, is that we are a state of 29 million people, the second largest economy, and our governor has now lifted the mask mandate, even though only 7% of Texans, now that includes him, so maybe he's okay with it, have gotten a vaccine. And so now across Texas, people are starting to not use masks again. Local governments have said in the big metroplexes that they're going to continue to mandate masks, but it's really unclear how that's going to work out, given that our own governor has said he's against it. Look, our governor, we know that just a few weeks ago, Texas was in the news nationally because we had a large-scale crisis that left millions of Texans without heat and water. Half of our state didn't have clean drinking water. There's thousands today that still don't have clean drinking water. And a lot of that was because our governor has refused to prepare for the consequences of climate change. You know, 2 years ago, our governor was quoted as saying that he wasn't sure if climate change was real because he's not a scientist. And look, I don't expect my governor to be a scientist, but I do expect him to use common sense and listen to the experts and people that are scientists. So when it comes to climate change, they're not willing to listen to the science. When it comes to the pandemic, they're not willing to listen to the science. He didn't listen to 3 of his 4 advisors, health experts, on lifting the mask mandate. And so it feels a little bit like instead of listening to the scientists, our governor is listening to the right-wing fringe and people like Alex Jones to decide what to do for a state of 29 million people.
Yeah. And, when you speak of the anti-science component of this, I'm reminded of an interview that Ted Cruz from your state, unfortunately, did with NPR, where he asserted his opinion on climate change because his parents were mathematicians or engineers, and he inserted himself to the detriment of the movement for climate justice and for climate change. What does it say about, and I don't want to make this germane only to your state because we see this across the country, but Republicans and conservatives seem to use any excuse possible to position themselves against the science when the science is there to protect us, right? And in the case of Ted Cruz and climate change, Ted Cruz going to Cancun, Mexico, and Greg Abbott lifting these bans, this is literally detrimental to actual lives. But yet it seems as if they don't care. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think they care. They are not motivated by public service or protecting the interests of ordinary Americans. They are motivated by power and profit. So when you talk about profit, when you talk about Ted Cruz and our governor, Greg Abbott, you're talking about some of the elected officials that are the highest funded, the most backed by oil and gas. They have a vested political interest and a financial incentive for their donors to deny the science on climate change. When you talk about the mask mandate, this is a question of power. Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz, we know, have presidential ambitions. And so they are positioning themselves for 2024 on the backs of 29 million people in our lives and our safety so that they can appeal to the farthest right-wing fringe that are anti-science. In North Texas, they're getting ready to do a mask burning. And to me, it feels like a book burning where we're going to deny reality, deny the facts and data, and instead allow a right-wing fanatical fringe to dictate how the rest of us live our lives.
You ran for Senate in 2020, and I'm sure you faced, just because I know politics across the country, I'm sure you faced headwinds not only from the Republican Party, but also the Democratic establishment. Talk to me about your campaign in context of what you're fighting for and the language that you use. I'm listening to you now. And you're stating it very clearly, the absolute threat that this anti-science movement poses to the rest of the United States and the people of Texas. But that language is not always direct from the Democratic Party. Talk to me about your campaign and your push to help the people of Texas, as well as the impediment that you face from the Democratic establishment.
Well, I am a progressive that's done social justice organizing in Texas for the last 2 decades, organizing undocumented workers for a decade, and then organizing young Latino voters across our state. And what I love about doing this kind of work in Texas is that generally there is no lefty choir to preach to. There are only non-believers to convert. But what does run deeply through Texas is economic populism. And you have candidates like Bernie Sanders who are wildly popular across the political spectrum in our state because people are hungry and desperate for real economic change. And that's how I ran my Senate campaign. And I think that Democrats and progressives win when we actually use that economic populist message, when we talk about and call out the Republican Party for their hypocrisy and our own party at times. Look, right now, what we need to be afraid of is that you have people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, the list goes on, saying that the Republican Party needs to become the party of the working class. And we may laugh at that, but they're not joking. They want to position themselves as that. But where we win is when we say, well, how can you say you represent the working class, but then not support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour? And we have to call it the Democrats that also aren't willing to support it. How can you say you support the working class and then not support expanding the rights of unions and workers in this country? We have to call them out on the total hypocrisy, because we, as progressives, do support working and middle class people, and they simply want to kowtow to their big donors. And it's clear in every single policy decision they make and stand for.
Which, the way you position that, actually, I understand it and I agree with it, but it bothers me. It bothers me because on so many occasions we see, or maybe it's perhaps the media promoting the anti-science portion of the Republican base, right? So we see videos of people burning masks. We see people in Texas who are going to stores and refusing to wear a mask, and they post videos of it. It gives the sentiment that some people, unfortunately, buy into, and they attack Texas in general, right? They attack Texans in general as being anti-science, and they get what they deserve in terms of who they elected. But it sounds like you have a different perspective because you're on the ground in Texas. What is the sentiment with regards to the science in terms of COVID-19, in terms of the anti-mask and the mask burnings? Are you finding it to be fighting a lost cause, or do you feel like there's more people who actually do obey the science and want to agree with the science, but there's no leadership on the science?
There's no leadership in our state. What you have to remember about Texas is we've had one of the lowest voter turnouts of any state in the country. The Republican Party hasn't maintained power through a mandate. They've maintained power through a minority of voter participation, and that's the way they like it. They want as few people voting as possible. And on top of that, you're going to see that in Texas, people have an image of I'm half white, half Mexican. People have an image of my white grandpa who wore cowboy boots and a fringe jacket. But really what they should be envisioning when they think about Texas is a state that's majority young, brown, black, and urban. That's who Texas is today. And those are the exact voters they don't want having power or a say in the political process. But people are organizing in this state. And when you change Texas, it's not just going to change the political outcome of our state for an election cycle. You're going to change the political outcome and possibility of this country for a generation. And that's why they are fighting tooth and nail to keep Black and brown communities from not showing up at the polls.
Let's dig into who they are, because I know with anything, you're facing headwinds, not only from the Republican Party, but also from the establishment. Could you unpack who they are, who wants to maintain the minority power control, and with a few seconds that we have left?
Well, in Texas, you're talking about 36 congressional seats, 38 electoral votes, the biggest battleground state in the country, the Republican Party that is largely held by a white, older minority of voters and establishment, backed by big oil and gas, backed by big political powers in the state, financial interests. We are a state that has no limits on campaign contributions for people running for statewide office. Greg Abbott already has $40 million in the bank for his next election. So taking on this kind of political party in this state requires massive investment in young voters, especially young voters of color. And I think it will happen in Texas, but it's going to happen not just because of the Democratic Party. It's going to happen because of the grassroots organizing and infrastructure that is built outside of the party to make the Democratic Party actually answer to the needs of working class communities, especially communities of color.
Christina Sensun Ramirez, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much.
The pleasure's ours.
Like what you see? Click the subscribe button below and don't forget to ring the bell to never miss another video from the Young Turks.